Lighthouse keepers were vital to maritime safety, serving as guardians of coastal navigation from the 18th century onward. The U.S. Lighthouse Service, established in 1789, centralized lighthouse management under federal authority, replacing state control. Lighthouse Service, established in 1789, centralized lighthouse management under federal authority, replacing state control. Initially, keepers reported to local customs collectors. But by the late 19th century, the role became more professionalized. Civil service status was granted in 1896, and the Bureau of Lighthouses was formed in 1910, later absorbed by the Coast Guard in 1939. Their duties extended beyond maintaining lights. They monitored weather, recorded maritime conditions, and responded to emergencies like shipwrecks. During storms, lights operated 24/7 until conditions improved. Keepers also maintained equipment, cleaned lenses, and operated fog signals, often working in isolation with limited supplies. The image of a solitary, weathered keeper in a rain slicker was far from universal. Many lived with families, sharing responsibilities with spouses or children. Women played active roles, sometimes inheriting keeper positions after a spouse's death. By the mid-19th century, African Americans also contributed to lighthouse operations, initially as enslaved laborers or paid servants. After emancipation, freed individuals were hired at southern stations, and by the 1870s, some lighthouses were staffed entirely by African Americans. The Pea Island Life-Saving Station in North Carolina, commanded by Richard Etheridge in 1880, became the first all-African American life-saving station in the U.S. Daily routines were structured, but demanding. Keepers rose before dawn to ensure lights were operational, often working through the night during storms. They maintained records, managed fuel supplies, and kept buildings in repair. The job required both technical skill and resilience, as isolation and harsh weather were constant challenges. Tools like Fresnel lenses, oil lamps, and foghorns were essential, and keepers relied on meticulous maintenance to prevent failures. Automation gradually replaced human keepers, with all U.S. lighthouses now automated except the Boston Light, which remains manned due to a 1989 law. This exception highlights the enduring symbolic role of lighthouses as beacons of safety. Keepers' records, including federal appointments, station logs, and census data, remain valuable for genealogical research, offering insights into family life and remote coastal communities. Their work, though often overlooked, shaped maritime history and safeguarded countless voyages. The transition from manual to automated systems underscores the evolving nature of their role, from hands-on guardians to modern technological stewards. Lighthouse keepers were federal employees from 1896, responsible for maintaining lights, responding to emergencies, and living in remote coastal locations. Their records, including employment files and federal logs, can reveal geographic ties, family life in isolated settings, and even the presence of women or African American keepers in roles that defied societal norms. The USLHS catalog, with its detailed data on people and places, offers a window into these lives, while the National Archives holds lighthouse service records that might include personal details about keepers and their families. However, these sources require careful interpretation, as they often reflect institutional priorities rather than personal narratives. For example, while many keepers lived alone, some had families who contributed to daily operations, and a few women inherited or managed lighthouses long after their husbands' deaths. Automation eventually replaced human keepers, but the Boston Light remains manned today, preserving a rare glimpse into this era. Genealogists should cross-reference these records with census data, local histories, and maritime archives to build a fuller picture of lighthouse keepers' lives and legacies. The Lighthouse Research Catalog serves as a critical resource for researchers seeking detailed records on lighthouse operations, personnel, and infrastructure. By categorizing data into places, people, objects, and vessels, it enables users to trace the evolution of specific sites, such as how a single lighthouse might have undergone multiple structural changes over time. For example, a lighthouse listed in a 1908 light list might later have been modified with a taller tower or a new Fresnel lens, details captured in the catalog's layered entries. The inclusion of sources like National Park Service reports or personal collections allows for cross-referencing, while the catalog's emphasis on accessibility ensures that even remote researchers can access high-resolution images, historical logs, and personnel records. This wealth of information not only supports maritime history, but also aids genealogists in uncovering the lives of keepers and their families, particularly in cases where traditional records are sparse. The collaborative nature of the project, involving historians, volunteers, and institutions, underscores the collective effort to preserve these often overlooked stories. The Lighthouse Research Catalog, now accessible online, serves as a critical resource for researchers seeking detailed information about lighthouses, their keepers, and associated maritime infrastructure. By categorizing data into places, people, objects, and vessels, the catalog enables users to trace the evolution of lighthouse operations from the early 19th century to modern automation. For genealogists, the People section offers insights into keeper families, their roles, and the social dynamics of remote coastal communities. The inclusion of historical documents, photographs, and records from institutions like the National Archives and the National Park Service provides a layered understanding of lighthouse history. Researchers can explore how keepers' responsibilities expanded beyond light maintenance to include weather monitoring, rescue efforts, and administrative tasks, all documented in the catalog's meticulously organized database. This resource underscores the intersection of maritime history, labor practices, and technological change, offering a window into the lives of those who safeguarded navigation for centuries. The global transition from manned to automated lighthouses during the 1960s-1980s marked a pivotal shift in maritime safety and coastal management. This transformation was driven by technological advancements, particularly the development of electric lighting systems and automated mechanisms that could sustain operation without human oversight. By the mid-20th century, electric lights had largely replaced the oil lamps of earlier centuries, reducing the need for frequent manual maintenance. However, the final step toward automation, removing the necessity of human keepers entirely, was a slower process, shaped by economic considerations and logistical challenges. Governments and maritime authorities sought to reduce operational costs, which had long been a burden for maintaining remote outposts. The U.S. Lighthouse Service, for instance, began phasing out manned stations in the 1960s, with all U.S. lighthouses automated by the 1980s, save for the Boston Light, which remained manned due to legislative intervention in 1989. Similar trends unfolded globally, with nations like the United Kingdom and Japan adopting automation to streamline operations and reallocate resources. The shift to automation was not merely a technical evolution, but a redefinition of maritime safety. Automated systems, including self-igniting electric lamps and remote monitoring technologies, ensured that lighthouses could operate continuously without human intervention. These systems were particularly advantageous in remote regions, where the cost of maintaining a keeper's residence and supplies was prohibitive. In places like Shetland, a cluster of islands in Scotland, the automation of lighthouses in the 1970s and 1980s had profound social consequences. Many keepers had been central figures in their communities, providing not only essential services, but also a sense of continuity in isolated areas. The closure of these posts disrupted local economies and eroded community ties, as the roles of keepers were replaced by distant administrative decisions. In Maine, a U.S. state with a similarly rugged coastline, The transition mirrored these patterns. The automation of lighthouses, such as the Great Diamond Island Light in the 1970s, reduced the need for on-site personnel, leading to the abandonment of keeper homes and the decline of associated local industries. While automation improved efficiency, it also highlighted the human cost of progress. The records preserved in the National Archives, including personnel lists and correspondence, reveal the bureaucratic processes behind these changes, underscoring how economic pragmatism often outweighed the cultural significance of lighthouse keepers. The global shift to automation thus reshaped not only maritime infrastructure, but also the communities that had long depended on these outposts, leaving a legacy of both technological advancement and social transformation. The Shetland Islands, situated in the North Atlantic, presented unique challenges for lighthouse keepers in the pre-electric era. Unlike the United States, Shetland's remote location and harsh maritime climate demanded exceptional resilience from its keepers. The region's isolation, combined with frequent storms and unpredictable weather, made maintaining a functional light a constant struggle. Keepers here, like their counterparts in the US, were responsible for ensuring the light operated according to strict schedules, often working through severe storms that required 24-hour vigilance. The physical demands of the job were immense, with keepers enduring relentless winds, salt corrosion, and the ever-present threat of shipwrecks. Family life in Shetland's lighthouses was complex. While many keepers lived with their families, the remoteness of the islands meant that social isolation was a reality. Children often attended school in nearby villages, and the keepers' roles extended beyond their duties, as they frequently assisted in local communities. Women, too, played vital roles, managing household tasks and sometimes contributing to maintenance work. The presence of families helped mitigate the loneliness of the post, but the isolation remained a defining aspect of life. The transition to automation in the mid-20th century mirrored the US experience, though the timing and scale differed. Shetland's lighthouses, like those in the US, gradually shed their human keepers as technology advanced. By the 1960s, many had been replaced by automated systems, though some remained manned for years. The shift was not without controversy. Some communities feared the loss of local employment and the erosion of cultural ties to the lighthouses. Yet, the automation of these remote stations reflected broader global trends, as the cost of maintaining human staff in such inhospitable environments became unsustainable. Despite the technological changes, the legacy of Shetland's lighthouse keepers endures. Their stories, much like those of their American counterparts, highlight the intersection of duty, resilience, and human ingenuity in the face of nature's challenges. The island's lighthouses, now silent sentinels, stand as monuments to the era when human hands and minds ensured safe passage through the stormy North Atlantic. The automation of Fair Isle South Lighthouse in the 1960s marked a pivotal shift in Shetland's maritime guardianship. Unlike the US, where automation progressed systematically from the 1930s onward, Shetland's transition was driven by the need to reduce costs in remote, harsh environments. The replacement of human keepers with mechanical systems, such as electric lights and remote monitoring, reduced dependency on local labor, but also severed historical ties to the island's coastal identity. While some Shetland lighthouses retained manned posts longer, the broader trend mirrored global patterns, reflecting the limits of sustaining human oversight in isolated, weather-exposed locations. This technological shift, though pragmatic, reshaped the cultural and economic landscape of Shetland's coastal communities. The role of a lighthouse keeper was both demanding and essential, blending routine maintenance with unpredictable emergencies. Their days often began before dawn and stretched past dusk, requiring vigilance to ensure the light operated according to schedules tailored to each station's location, weather, and other factors. During storms, the light had to stay on 24/7, until conditions improved. Beyond this, keepers handled repairs, inspections, and other duties, while remaining ready to respond to crises like shipwrecks. The 1927 instructions to employees of the U.S. Lighthouse Service outlined these responsibilities, emphasizing both technical upkeep and conduct, including the mandatory use of the official uniform. The image of a solitary, weathered keeper in a rain slicker was a stereotype, but the reality was more nuanced. Many keepers lived with families who often contributed to their work. Women, for instance, frequently assisted their husbands or took over the role after their death or incapacitation, holding the position for years. By the mid-19th century, African Americans also played significant roles, serving as paid servants or enslaved individuals at lighthouses. As societal changes unfolded, particularly after the Civil War, African Americans began working as keepers in southern stations. By the late 1870s, some lighthouses were staffed entirely by African Americans, including the Pea Island Life-Saving Station in North Carolina, which became the first all-African American life-saving station in 1880, led by Richard Etheridge. Automation gradually rendered traditional keepers obsolete. Today, all U.S. lighthouses are automated, except the Boston Light, which remains manned due to a 1989 law. This exception highlights the enduring symbolic and practical value of human oversight in certain locations. For researchers, resources like the U.S. Lighthouse Society's Lighthouse Research Catalog offer extensive data, including photos, documents, and records organized by categories like places, people, objects, and vessels. These archives, supported by donations and volunteer efforts, provide a comprehensive view of lighthouse history. Similarly, the National Archives houses logbooks from 1872 to 1940, detailing weather, repairs, rescues, and station activities. These records, part of Record Group 26, reflect the evolving responsibilities of lighthouse keepers and their critical role in maritime safety. Together, these sources underscore the complexity of lighthouse operations, the diversity of those who served, and the transition from human stewardship to technological reliance. They also preserve the legacy of a profession that shaped navigation and saved lives for centuries. Lighthouse keepers played a vital role in maritime safety, particularly in the United States, where their duties were formalized through the U.S. Lighthouse Service, established in 1789. Initially, keepers operated under local customs collectors, but by the 19th century, the role became more professionalized. Civil service employment began in 1896, and the Bureau of Lighthouses was created in 1910, later transferred to the Coast Guard in 1939. Their responsibilities extended beyond maintaining the light. They managed repairs, navigational aids, and emergency responses, often working long hours from dawn to dusk. During storms, lights had to remain operational 24/7. The 1927 Instructions to Employees outlined protocols for both technical tasks. The image of a solitary, weathered keeper in a rain slicker was not universal. Many keepers lived with families who often assisted in duties. Women frequently contributed to their husband's work, and some inherited the role after a spouse's death or incapacitation. By the mid-19th century, African Americans also served as keepers or laborers, though their roles evolved with societal changes. By the late 1870s, some lighthouses were staffed by African American keepers, and the Pea Island Life-Saving Station in North Carolina became the first all-African American life-saving station in 1880. Automation gradually replaced human keepers, making the role obsolete by the late 20th century. Today, all U.S. lighthouses are automated, except the Boston Light, which remains manned due to a 1989 law. The Coast Guard honored lighthouse keepers by naming 14 ships in the Keeper class after notable historical figures built between 1996 and 2000. These vessels maintain aids to navigation, including lighthouses, reflecting the enduring legacy of keepers. Beyond their practical duties, Lighthouses inspired cultural works, from literature and film to music. Stories like The Lighthouse by Robert Eggers or the 1980 film by the same name explore the isolation and challenges of the role. The 1975 goodies. EK Scooty Scooty. Big Scooties also highlight the unique lives of keepers. Their work ensured safe passage for countless sailors, blending technical expertise with personal sacrifice. The legacy of lighthouse keepers endures in both the physical structures they maintained and the cultural narratives that celebrate their role. Today, while the profession has faded, their impact continues through preserved sites, historical records, and the symbolic power of lighthouses as beacons of guidance and hope. The automation of Goat Island Lighthouse in 1990 marked a pivotal moment in the history of lighthouse keeping in Maine. As part of a broader national trend, the transition from manual operation to automated systems made many keepers unnecessary. Coast Guard, which had overseen lighthouses since 1939, gradually replaced human keepers with technology, including electric lights, remote monitoring, and automated signaling. By the 1990s, most lighthouses, including Goat Island, had been equipped with these systems, reducing the need for full-time staff. However, the process was not uniform. Some sites, like Boston Light, were legally mandated to remain manned, preserving a small contingent of keepers. The shift to automation brought both efficiency and challenges. While it eliminated the dangers of manual labor in remote locations, it also diminished the personal connection between keepers and their stations. For many, the automation of Goat Island in 1990 symbolized the end of an era. Yet, the lighthouse's history did not end there. Instead, it evolved. The Loweir family, who now steward the site, embody this transition. Their role is not merely custodial but deeply rooted in preservation. They maintain the physical structure, ensure the historical integrity of the site, and uphold the traditions that once defined lighthouse keeping. Unlike their predecessors, who operated under the Coast Guard's protocols, the Loweirs navigate a different kind of responsibility, one that balances technological adaptation with cultural memory. The Loweirs' stewardship reflects a broader trend in Maine's lighthouses. While automation rendered many stations unmanned, some were entrusted to families or private organizations, ensuring their survival as historical landmarks. This model preserves the human element in a world increasingly dominated by machines. The Loweirs' work includes routine maintenance, seasonal inspections, and the careful documentation of the lighthouse's history. They also engage with the public, offering guided tours that educate visitors about the lighthouse's past and its place in maritime history. Their efforts underscore the idea that even in an age of automation, the spirit of lighthouse keeping endures through those who choose to carry its legacy forward. For Goat Island, the automation of 1990 was not an end, but a transformation. The lighthouse's story now includes both the triumphs of technology and the resilience of human stewardship. The Loweirs' role as keepers is a testament to the enduring significance of these structures, not just as functional beacons, but as symbols of perseverance and connection to the sea. Their work ensures that the lighthouse remains more than a relic. It is a living testament to the interplay between innovation and tradition. For generations, Shetland's lighthouses had been more than navigational aids. They were lifelines, their keepers guardians of the sea's capricious moods. The last two keepers, a husband and wife team, had tended the light for over 3 decades, their routines etched into the rhythm of the island's winds. As they handed over the keys to the lighthouse, the event carried a weight that transcended mere transition. It was a farewell to a way of life, one deeply intertwined with the land's history and the resilience of its people. The ceremony unfolded against the backdrop of Shetland's rugged coastline, where the sea's roar had once been the only constant. The keeper's retirement symbolized the quiet end of an age, when human vigilance was indispensable against the elements. For centuries, lighthouse keepers had lived in isolation, their days governed by the tides and their nights by the flicker of a solitary flame. The automation of these stations in the late 20th century had rendered such solitude obsolete, yet the cultural and emotional legacy of the role endured. The royal attendees, including a member of the House of Windsor, underscored the national significance of the moment, recognizing the lighthouse's role in shaping maritime history. For the local community, the event was both a celebration and a somber reflection. The keeper's departure marked the end of an era where the lighthouses were not just structures, but symbols of human perseverance. Children who had grown up hearing tales of the keeper's vigilance now stood in the shadow of a changing world. The ceremony included a reading of letters penned by the keepers, detailing their memories of storms, the camaraderie of fellow keepers, and the quiet dignity of their work. These words, preserved in the archives of the Association of Lighthouse Keepers, echoed the broader narrative of a profession that had once been vital to maritime safety. As the last light of North Row Lighthouse dimmed, the event underscored a paradox. While technology had rendered human guardianship unnecessary, the spirit of the keepers lived on in the stories and traditions they left behind. The royal presence lent the moment a sense of permanence, framing the lighthouse's legacy as part of a national heritage. Yet, for the people of Shetland, the true significance lay in the human connection. The keepers' unwavering dedication to a task that had, for centuries, defined their relationship with the sea. The ceremony was not an end, but a transition, a quiet acknowledgement that the past had shaped the present, and the present would carry its lessons forward. Louisa's connection to Goat Island feels almost mythical, as if the land itself has a will to draw people into its embrace. The stories of kayakers compelled to paddle closer, or the peculiarities of tools left behind. Like a screwdriver replaced by a hammer, like a screwdriver replaced by a hammer. Yet, for Louis, the island is not a mystery, but a responsibility, one he shares with a network of volunteers and local supporters. They gather annually to reclaim fishing gear, repurpose it for the community, and preserve the island's history through donations, like the decades of paintings left by a woman whose mother once called the place home. The island's significance extends beyond its natural beauty, rooted in a history that might be explored through records of lighthouse operations. While the text does not mention a lighthouse, the broader context of such structures managed by the U.S. A keeper's job was not strictly a 24-hour job, but it could involve long hours. These records, spanning from property deeds to keeper appointments, might reveal how Goat Island was once a sentinel for sailors, its light guiding them through treacherous waters. For Louis, the past and present of the island are intertwined, a legacy he safeguards with the same care he shows for its shores. As his dinghy retreats from the harbor, the rhythm of waves and gulls underscores a truth he knows well. The island's pull is not just physical, but a quiet promise to protect what has been entrusted to him. The island's history, Louis explained, is etched into the very rock beneath his feet, a legacy preserved in the National Archives' meticulous records of lighthouse operations and the lives of those who tended them. He often pored over microfilmed logs of keeper appointments, their names and dates scribbled in the margins of old journals, wondering how many of their stories had been lost to time. The annual reports of the Lighthouse Board, he noted, occasionally mentioned Goat Island's role as a navigational aid, though the details were sparse, as if the island itself had been a silent witness to the tides. Louis's work, he admitted, was as much about preservation as it was about stewardship. The volunteer network, he said, had become a kind of modern-day keepers' guild, passing down knowledge of the island's hidden nooks and the subtle shifts in its ecosystem. One volunteer, a retired marine biologist, had spent decades cataloging the intertidal life that clung to the granite shores, while another, a local historian, had compiled a ledger of every artifact recovered from the island's beaches. These efforts, Luia said, were a way of honoring the past without romanticizing it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the island in hues of amber and violet, Luia lingered on the shore, the weight of centuries pressing against the salt-kissed air. The lighthouse, though dormant, stood as a sentinel, its beam a promise that the island's story would endure, whether through the hands of keepers, volunteers, or the quiet persistence of the sea itself. Historical records describe keepers as government employees, tasked with maintaining beacons, cleaning lenses, refueling lamps, and operating fob signals, often living in remote coastal locations with limited contact with the outside world. Their duties required technical skill, patience, and resilience against severe weather, as noted in accounts of their structured yet repetitive routines. These challenges persisted into modern times, as current keepers in British Columbia face similar hardships, including harsh weather, long stretches of solitude, and the reliance on helicopters for transport. While historical keepers relied on oil lamps and Fresnel lenses, today's keepers benefit from advanced technology and better amenities, though the physical and psychological toll of the job remains. Both eras highlight the indispensable role of human judgment in navigating dangerous waters, a responsibility that continues to attract some as a unique career path, despite its demanding nature. The transition from manual to automated systems has reshaped the role, yet the core responsibilities of ensuring navigational safety remain. While modern keepers no longer refuel oil lamps or manually adjust Fresnel lenses, they still monitor automated beacons, maintain electrical systems, and document weather patterns, tasks that echo the meticulous routines of their 19th century counterparts. The shift to automation, which began in the mid-20th century, reduced the need for permanent staff, yet remote stations like Leonard Island still require human oversight. For those who choose the role today, the blend of technical skill and solitude offers a unique connection to history, as their work now intersects with the legacy of earlier keepers who relied on handwritten logs and rudimentary tools. The isolation that once defined the job persists, though modern amenities mitigate some of its harsher aspects, allowing keepers to balance duty with a semblance of normalcy. As the Canadian Coast Guard continues to manage these stations, the profession remains a bridge between past and present, preserving a role that has safeguarded maritime routes for centuries. The transition from manual to automated systems has reshaped the role, though the core responsibilities of ensuring navigational safety remain. Modern lighthouses now rely on remote monitoring and solar power, reducing the need for constant on-site presence. Yet, as Woodward noted, the human element is irreplaceable. "There's no substitute for eyes and ears," she said, highlighting the critical need for real-time judgment in emergencies. The Canadian Coast Guard now employs fewer keepers, but the job's allure persists for those drawn to its blend of solitude and purpose. Applications, though limited, remain open for those willing to embrace the challenges, though the pay, while improved, still lags behind many professions. For ex-keepers like Porter and Woodward, the memories linger: the quiet of dawn, the weight of responsibility, and the rare moments of connection when the weather finally cooperates. The Goat Island Lighthouse, a solar-powered beacon in Kennebunkport, Maine, stands as a relic of a bygone era. Once automated in 1990, it became the state's final traditional lighthouse to transition from manual operation. Today, it's tended by Nick Luia and his family, who've embraced the role of stewards rather than mere caretakers. Their work blends preservation with modern adaptation, balancing the island's history with its evolving needs. Luia, 41, and his wife Amy, along with their 12-year-old son Brandon, live on the island from May to November, managing its upkeep and serving as a guide for visitors. The family joined an apprentice program in 2020, gradually taking over from the previous keepers who retired in 2024. Their days are dictated by tides and tasks: mowing, clearing poison ivy, repainting weathered buildings, and responding to fog signal requests from boaters. The Lighthouse, managed by the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust since 1998, is a hub for both practical work and quiet reflection. The island itself feels like a time capsule. Lawea describes it as a place where the rhythms of the mainland fade, replaced by the foghorn's call and the crash of waves. Visitors range from overseas tourists to local families, and the Laweas have even encountered a nervous young man with an engagement ring in his pocket. The keeper's quarters, oil house, and bunkhouse cluster along the rocky shore, while the lighthouse looms as the island's focal point. Lawea's role extends beyond maintenance. He's helped with firefighter transport and search and rescue efforts for stranded lobstermen, and he's tackling projects like restoring the dock damaged in 2024 storms, or planting seagrass to combat erosion. His vision is to thoughtfully modernize the island, ensuring its historical integrity remains intact. Keeping the island from disappearing is his mission, though he acknowledges the challenges of living miles from the nearest hardware store. The community plays a vital role in sustaining the lighthouse. Volunteers, local businesses, and organizations contribute to efforts like Take Back Day, which recycles salvaged fishing gear for lobstermen. Lawea credits this network for making his work possible, calling it an amazing volunteer network. For Lawea, the island is more than a job. It's a way of life. He and his family have grown accustomed to its rhythms, even finding mystery in its quirks, like a hammer replacing a forgotten screwdriver. The island, he says, feels like it has its own living soul, drawing people in with its quiet allure. As the sun sets over the harbor, Lawea prepares to greet the first lobster boats the next morning, ready to begin the cycle again. Many of the volumes were destroyed or severely damaged in 1921. Many early structures incorporated locally sourced granite or sandstone, shaped by hand using traditional masonry techniques passed down through generations. The data is organized into 4 primary categories: places, people, objects, and vessels. In some cases, wooden elements were added for internal structures, though these were often replaced or reinforced over time to combat rot and decay. Contributors to the catalog include, but are not limited to, beyond their physical construction, these lighthouses were deeply embedded in the cultural and social fabric of the islands. The main lighthouse photograph shown is the lighthouse as it currently appears, or as it appeared prior to any destruction. Keepers and their families lived in the lighthouse or nearby, contributing to the daily maintenance of the light and the upkeep of the surrounding area. Their presence was a constant in the lives of islanders, offering a sense of security and connection to the wider world. Even as automation gradually replaced human keepers in the 20th century, the legacy of these structures endured. Today, many Shetland lighthouses stand as silent sentinels, their weathered stones and rusted mechanisms serving as tangible links to a bygone era of maritime navigation. They remain not only as functional landmarks but also as symbols of the resilience and resourcefulness of the Shetland people, their stories etched into the very foundations of these enduring monuments. The transition to automation in the 20th century transformed lighthouse operations, yet the material legacy of these structures endures. Shetland's lighthouses, often built from local stone or timber, reflected both practicality and regional craftsmanship. Archives like the Association of Lighthouse Keepers collection preserve station journals and engineers' drawings, offering insight into maintenance challenges and design adaptations over centuries. These records highlight how keepers navigated harsh climates while balancing routine upkeep with emergency response. Meanwhile, the U.S. Lighthouse Service's shift to standardized protocols in the 1920s underscored the growing professionalism of the role. though many keepers, particularly women and later African American staff, continued to shape the profession's social fabric long after automation rendered human oversight obsolete. The transition from human-operated lighthouses to automated systems began in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, driven by technological advancements. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, lighthouses were critical to maritime navigation, notifying vessels of dangerous shoals, reefs, and coastlines. This exception stems from a 1989 law requiring the Boston Light to remain staffed, preserving its role as a historical and operational landmark. While automation reduced the need for full-time keepers, the Boston Light's continued manned status highlights the enduring significance of lighthouse service in maritime safety. The U.S. Lighthouse Society's digital archive, known as the J. Candace Clifford Lighthouse Research Catalog, serves as a critical resource for preserving and sharing lighthouse history. Developed through collaborative efforts, the catalog houses over 3 terabytes of data, organized into 4 categories: places, people, objects, and vessels. This includes records of lighthouses, keepers, historical equipment, and vessels sourced from institutions like the National Park Service, the USCG Historian's Office, and individual collectors. The archive's online accessibility, made possible by donations and member support, ensures that researchers and enthusiasts can access detailed information about lighthouses and their operations. Lighthouse keepers, once central to maritime navigation, maintained critical responsibilities such as lighting beacons, cleaning lenses, refueling lamps, and operating fog signals. Their work required meticulous attention to detail, as the reliability of lighthouses directly impacted maritime safety. Many lived in isolated coastal locations, often with limited contact with the outside world, enduring harsh weather and long periods of solitude. These conditions shaped the records they left behind, including federal appointment logs, station reports, and census entries, which remain invaluable for genealogical and historical research. The catalog's data fields, such as the source field near lighthouse photographs, clarify the historical context of entries. For example, a 1908 light list entry might reflect the lighthouse's configuration at that time, while additional photographs or documents could show later modifications. This approach ensures accuracy while acknowledging the evolution of lighthouse structures over time. The catalog's ongoing development, with plans to refine data and expand collections, underscores its role as a dynamic repository for U.S. lighthouse history. For researchers, the catalog and related records offer insights into the lives of keepers, their technical expertise, and the challenges of their profession. The interplay between historical records and modern archives preserves the legacy of lighthouse service, bridging the gap between past and present. As automation continues to reshape maritime practices, the enduring importance of lighthouses and the people who once safeguarded them remains a testament to their role in shaping safe navigation. The lighthouse keepers of Shetland, like their counterparts in other coastal regions, had responsibilities that extended beyond maintaining infrastructure. Before the advent of electricity, their daily routines were deeply intertwined with the rhythms of the sea and the land. Beyond maintaining the beacon that guided ships through treacherous waters, these keepers were involved in monitoring the surrounding ecosystems. The Shetland archipelago, with its rugged cliffs, salt marshes, and migratory bird colonies, demanded a level of environmental awareness that extended far beyond the mechanical upkeep of their towers. Records from the 19th century reveal that Shetland's keepers were often the first to notice changes in the local environment. They documented shifts in bird populations, the erosion of coastal lands, and the impact of fishing practices on marine life. Their reports were used to improve navigation and inform weather-related safety measures. Keepers noted when nesting sites were disturbed by storms or human activity, and some took it upon themselves to erect protective barriers or advocate for sustainable fishing quotas. Their environmental observations contributed to broader maritime safety efforts. When storms battered the islands, they repaired damaged seawalls and monitored the movement of sand dunes that could swallow entire stretches of coastline. In the winter, they tracked the migration of whales and seals, ensuring that fishing activities did not disrupt these species' breeding grounds. Their observations, though informal, provided early warnings of ecological imbalances that would later be studied by scientists. Adapting to climate change was another challenge these keepers faced. Rising sea levels and shifting weather patterns forced them to modify their stations, reinforcing foundations and relocating equipment to higher ground. Some accounts suggest that keepers in the late 1800s began experimenting with new methods to preserve the fragile salt marshes that filtered pollutants from the water. These efforts, though modest, reflected an understanding of the interconnectedness between human activity and the natural world. In Shetland, the lighthouse keeper's role was not merely technical, but profoundly ecological. Their work laid the groundwork for modern environmental stewardship, blending practical observation with a deep respect for the land and sea. Though their tools were simple, oil lamps, notebooks, and hand tools, their impact was enduring, shaping the relationship between coastal communities and their environment for generations. Their meticulous records, often preserved in local archives, became foundational for later ecological studies, bridging traditional knowledge with scientific inquiry. This legacy endures in Shetland's contemporary conservation efforts, where their stewardship of coastal ecosystems is acknowledged as an early model for sustainable coexistence between human activity and natural resilience. The legacy of lighthouse keepers as stewards of their environments extended beyond the mere maintenance of structures. The archive became a significant resource for members and researchers. Their duties, as documented by the National Park Service, encompassed not only the upkeep of the lighthouse itself, but also the surrounding land and sea. This included monitoring coastal erosion, managing vegetation to prevent fires, and ensuring that human activity did not disrupt local wildlife. While specific initiatives such as seagrass planting or poison ivy control are not explicitly detailed in the records, the broader context of their responsibilities suggests a deep engagement with ecological preservation. The archives, including the National Archives and the US LHS Digital Catalog, reveal that lighthouse keepers often lived in isolation, their routines intertwined with the rhythms of nature. They were tasked with maintaining the delicate balance between human presence and the environment, a role that required both practical skills and an awareness of ecological interdependencies. For instance, the management of invasive species like poison ivy would have been a necessary part of keeping the shoreline safe and accessible, while the care of coastal vegetation might have included efforts to protect nesting grounds or prevent soil degradation. These actions, though not always recorded in the formal histories of lighthouses, were essential to the sustainability of the regions they served. Community projects further underscored their role as environmental custodians. Keepers often collaborated with local fishermen and conservationists, sharing knowledge about migratory patterns, weather shifts, and the health of marine life. Their observations, though informal, contributed to a collective understanding of the ecosystem. The records from the National Archives, which include correspondence and personnel logs, hint at these interactions, revealing a network of individuals who viewed the lighthouse not just as a beacon for ships, but as a guardian of the land and sea. While the specifics of Goat Island's initiatives remain partially obscured by the passage of time, the broader narrative of lighthouse keepers as environmental stewards is clear. Their work, though uncelebrated, laid the groundwork for modern conservation efforts, reminding us that the quiet dedication of those who tended these remote outposts shaped the natural world in ways both profound and enduring. The National Archives correspondence and personnel logs suggest that keepers at Goat Island and similar stations often coordinated with local fishermen and conservation groups, exchanging knowledge about migratory patterns and habitat preservation. These informal networks, documented in fragmented records, reveal a grassroots environmental awareness that predated formal conservation efforts. The Lighthouse Research Catalogue, meanwhile, may hold additional details on specific initiatives, such as seagrass restoration or erosion control, though many records remain incomplete, leaving gaps in the full story of their ecological impact. Canada is seeking assistant lighthouse keepers to man 51 staffed lighthouses along its coastline. Today, applicants need no formal education but must possess skills to maintain lighthouses' mechanical and electrical systems, including lenses and bulbs. Experience in building upkeep and Microsoft Office is also required. While pay has risen from a range of $45,241 to $60,741 to $60,72813 to $66,813 to $60,813, beauty, they say, is one of them. Calm evenings and sunsets, once routine, are now rare. For some, the work was a unique chapter, offering a sense of purpose and connection to the sea. Keepers may face challenging weather conditions that delay departures. Leave is typically limited to 1 or 2 times per year. Woodward felt a strong connection to her natural environment. Food supplies are delivered periodically by helicopter. Annual reports from the Lighthouse Board and Commissioner of Lighthouses, RG 287, provide broader context on funding and management. The job offers a distinct experience with limited social interaction. Personnel records, such as the registers of lighthouse keepers, narrow microfilm M1373, list names, appointments, salaries, and resignations. Applicants must submit their applications before the year ends. For those interested in the physical structures, lighthouse plans and drawings are catalogued in Special List Number 57, though the publication is now out of print. The transition from manual to automated systems has changed the nature of the work. While modern lighthouses rely on technology, the human element remains vital. Former keepers emphasize the irreplaceable value of on-site observation and quick decision-making. For those considering the role, the Canadian Coast Guard still recruits, with applications due by year's end. The job remains a blend of technical skill, responsibility, and a connection to the natural world, a legacy preserved in historical records, and the enduring need for vigilance at sea. Goat Island, a small, solar-powered island just beyond Cape Porpoise Pier, feels like a place where time slows. Nick Lawea, 41, lives there as the lighthouse keeper from May to November, sharing the island with his wife, their 12-year-old son, and their dog. The lighthouse, a crown jewel of the harbor, has been automated since 1990, marking the end of traditional lighthouse keeping in Maine. Lawea's family joined an apprentice program in 2020, gradually taking over the role from longtime keepers who retired in 2024. Now, they manage the island's upkeep, ensuring its survival amid the tides and storms. The lighthouse, managed by the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust, was leased from the U.S. Coast Guard in 1992 and fully owned by the Trust in 1998 through the Maine Lights program. Lawea, who grew up exploring the island with its former keepers, brings a background in irrigation and marine operations to his role. His work includes repairing the dock damaged in 2024 storms, restoring the boat shed, and planting seagrass to combat erosion. He also explores using goats to clear poison ivy, a task that requires creativity given the island's remote location. Daily life on Goat Island is dictated by the rhythms of the sea. Lawea and his family mow the grounds, clear poison ivy, repaint buildings, and respond to fog signal requests from boaters. Visitors, ranging from overseas tourists to local families, leave eclectic entries in the keeper's log. The island's isolation fosters a unique connection to its history, with Luia describing it as stepping back in time. A 2011 restoration returned the light station to its 1950s appearance, rebuilding the storm-damaged walkway and fog bell tower. Even a vintage icebox from the 1950s still hums in the keeper's kitchen. Luia's vision is to thoughtfully modernize the island while preserving its historical integrity. He plants seagrass to stabilize the shoreline and plans to restore the boat shed. Yet the work is as much about preservation as it is about survival. Just surviving out there is a whole project, he says, noting the challenges of living miles from the nearest hardware store. The island's charm lies in its quiet, deliberate pace. Luia's son, Brandon, has grown up immersed in the island's history, learning to navigate its tides and lead impromptu tours. For Luia, the island feels like its own living soul, drawing people in with its mystery. Local support, including annual Take Back Day events that return salvaged fishing gear to lobstermen, sustains the island's legacy. As Luia's dinghy pulls away from shore, the waves against granite and gulls overhead remind him that the lighthouse remains a beacon for those who rely on it. The transition from manually operated lighthouses to automated systems marked a pivotal shift in maritime safety and efficiency. The service was the first Public Works Act of the U.S. Congress. Early innovations, such as the adoption of electric lights over oil lamps, laid the groundwork for more reliable illumination. By the mid-20th century, electronic components and remote control mechanisms further streamlined operations, reducing the need for on-site personnel. This evolution allowed lighthouses to function with minimal human intervention, ensuring that their beacons remained active even in the most challenging conditions. The impact of these changes was profound. Automated systems minimized the risk of human error, such as fatigue or oversight, which could compromise navigational safety. Additionally, the ability to maintain uninterrupted lighting extended the visibility range for ships, particularly during critical hours like dawn and dusk. This reliability significantly reduced maritime accidents and improved the efficiency of coastal navigation. However, the process was not without challenges. Transitioning to automation required substantial investment in infrastructure and technology, and some lighthouses, like the Boston Light, remained manned due to their historical significance or unique operational needs. Beyond operational benefits, automation also transformed the role of lighthouses in modern maritime practices. With the integration of electronic monitoring systems, authorities could track the status of beacons in real time, enabling swift responses to malfunctions. This level of oversight enhanced the overall safety of maritime routes and underscored the importance of technological adaptation in preserving navigational aids. As automation continued to evolve, it reinforced the idea that innovation and reliability could coexist, ensuring that lighthouses remained vital assets in the ever-changing landscape of seafaring. The shift to automation also spurred the adoption of solar power and remote monitoring systems, which addressed the limitations of traditional fuel-based operations. Solar panels, increasingly viable in the late 20th century, provided a sustainable energy source for lighthouses in sunny regions, reducing dependency on costly and logistically challenging fuel deliveries. Remote monitoring systems, linked via radio or satellite, allowed operators to track beacon status in real time, enabling rapid responses to malfunctions without requiring on-site presence. These technologies not only lowered long-term maintenance costs, but also expanded the reach of lighthouses to remote or hazardous locations. However, the transition faced resistance from traditionalists who valued the human oversight of keepers. Despite this, automation proved indispensable in enhancing reliability, particularly in extreme weather, where uninterrupted lighting became critical for maritime safety. The integration of these systems marked a pivotal step in modernizing lighthouses, ensuring their continued relevance in an era of advancing maritime technology. The shift to automated lighthouses brought significant financial and logistical hurdles. Initially under the jurisdiction of the Imperial Japanese Navy, the responsibility for maintaining lighthouses was later transferred to the Maritime Safety Agency following World War II. In 2006, Mishima Lighthouse became the last of Japan's lighthouses to achieve automation. Repairs required specialized equipment and personnel, frequently necessitating costly trips by boat or helicopter, which added to operational expenses. As of the end of 2015, 2 of the 5 lighthouses were still maintained by rotating staff. Coast Guard's oversight after 1939 introduced new administrative complexities as federal agencies grappled with funding automation projects while balancing existing maintenance responsibilities. Maatsuka Island Lighthouse, though fully automated, still employs volunteer caretakers for specific duties. Automated systems could fail due to extreme weather, power outages, or mechanical malfunctions, requiring keepers or technicians to travel to remote sites for troubleshooting. In Shetland, where distances between lighthouses were vast and weather unpredictable, the need for on-site checks persisted, blurring the line between automation and traditional oversight. The song, "The Eddystone Light," draws on the legend of the lighthouse keeper and his son, the U.S. In the UK version of Fraggle Rock, the character Doc was reimagined as a retired sailor living in a lighthouse. Comparisons between Shetland and Maine highlight divergent approaches to automation. Shetland's lighthouses, often reliant on diesel generators, required frequent fuel deliveries, a logistical nightmare in winter storms. Henryk Sienkiewicz's novella, The Lighthouse Keeper of Aspinwalls, is a notable literary work featuring lighthouse keepers. Both regions struggled with the paradox of automation. While it reduced long-term labor costs, it introduced new dependencies on technology and supply chains. The film, The Light at the Edge of the World, is an adaptation of Emma StoneX's novel. The financial burden of automation extended beyond initial installation costs, as both regions grappled with the expense of maintaining complex systems. Edgar Allan Poe's The Lighthouse is an unfinished novel featuring a lighthouse keeper. The 1927 U.S. The 2016 film The Lighthouse and the 2019 film The Lighthouse both feature lighthouse keepers. Jules Verne's novel The Lighthouse at the End of the World features lighthouse-related themes. The Boston Light's continued manned operation in 1989 symbolized this tension, highlighting that automation's promise often collided with the unpredictable realities of coastal environments, where nature's demands outstripped even the most sophisticated machinery. The transition to automation in the late 20th century rendered traditional lighthouse keepers obsolete, yet the cultural and symbolic legacy of these structures endures. In places like Shetland and Maine, lighthouses have long served as more than navigational aids. They are anchors of identity, resilience, and communal memory. Their physical presence on rugged coastlines or remote islands mirrors the enduring human relationship with the sea, a relationship shaped by both peril and possibility. Even as their operational roles evolved, lighthouses retained their status as emblems of protection, guiding vessels through storms and symbolizing the collective effort to safeguard lives and livelihoods. In Shetland, where the North Atlantic's relentless waves have shaped a maritime culture for centuries, lighthouses are woven into the fabric of local history. The Shetland Light, for instance, has stood as a sentinel since the 18th century. Its beam a familiar beacon for fishermen and traders navigating the treacherous waters. Stories of keepers, often solitary figures enduring harsh winters and isolation, have become part of oral tradition. their sacrifices celebrated as acts of duty and courage. The lighthouses themselves, with their weathered stone towers and enduring flames, embody the community's resilience, a testament to generations who relied on them for safety. Maine, too, has a deep connection to its lighthouses, many of which were built in the 19th century to protect bustling coastal towns and fishing villages. The Great Head Light, for example, has guided ships through the Penobscot Bay for over a century, its presence a reminder of the region's maritime heritage. Here, lighthouses often served as hubs of activity, where keepers and their families lived, traded, and fostered connections between coastal communities. Even as automation replaced human keepers, the structures remained symbols of the region's history, their stories preserved in local lore and preserved as heritage sites. The cultural significance of lighthouses extends beyond their practical functions. They have inspired art, literature, and folklore, often depicted as mystical or almost sentient guardians of the shore. In Shetland, the idea of a lighthouse as a living entity, watchful, enduring, and almost human, appears in local tales, where the light is said to flicker in response to the needs of those at sea. Similarly, in Maine, the image of a lighthouse has been romanticized in poetry and paintings, capturing both the beauty and the danger of the coastal landscape. These narratives reflect a broader human fascination with light as a symbol of hope, guidance, and the triumph of human ingenuity over nature's forces. Today, while most lighthouses are automated, exceptions like the Boston Light Manned since 1989 serve as living reminders of their historical role. These structures continue to inspire, not only as physical landmarks, but as cultural touchstones that connect communities to their past. Their enduring presence on coastlines around the world ensures that the stories of lighthouses, of keepers, storms, and survival will remain part of the human narrative, etched into the very stones that guard the shores. The business of maintaining lighthouses became more professionalized. From the earliest days of the U.S. Lighthouse Service, established in 1789, these individuals bore the solemn responsibility of ensuring vessels traversed treacherous waters with guidance. Their roles extended beyond mere operation of the light. They were custodians of the sea, vigilantly monitoring weather, charting courses, and responding to emergencies. The daily grind of their work, maintaining intricate Fresnel lenses, fueling lamps, and enduring isolation, was a silent but vital contribution to the safety of countless sailors. Yet, their legacy is not confined to the past. The transition to automation in the 20th century, which rendered many keepers obsolete, did not erase their impact. Instead, it shifted the focus from human vigilance to technological precision. Yet, the foundational principles they upheld, caution, vigilance, and service, remain integral to modern maritime practices. Today, the remnants of their work endure in preserved lighthouses, which stand as both historical landmarks and symbols of human ingenuity. The Boston Light, for instance, remains manned, a living reminder of the enduring need for human oversight in critical infrastructure. The diversity among keepers themselves adds another layer to their legacy. Women, often overlooked in historical narratives, filled roles as keepers, assistants, and even as leaders in some cases. Similarly, the inclusion of African American keepers, such as those documented in records from the National Archives, underscores the broader societal shifts and the resilience of individuals navigating systemic barriers. These stories, once fragmented, are now being reclaimed through meticulous research, revealing a more inclusive tapestry of maritime history. Beyond their operational roles, lighthouse keepers became stewards of the coastal environment. Their intimate knowledge of local ecosystems, tides, and weather patterns laid the groundwork for modern conservation efforts. Today, organizations and historians draw upon their records to study environmental changes over centuries, recognizing the value of their observations in understanding climate shifts and ecological preservation. In this way, the legacy of lighthouse keepers transcends their era. Their work, once a solitary vigil against the sea, now informs contemporary practices in safety, technology, and environmental stewardship. The human element, once central to lighthouse operations, remains vital, bridging past and present in safeguarding both maritime routes and ecological heritage. The transition from humanity to automated systems marked a pivotal shift in the history of lighthouses. Before the mid-20th century, lighthouse keepers were indispensable, tasked with maintaining the light, monitoring weather conditions, and ensuring the beacon remained operational through night and storm. Their work was meticulous, requiring constant vigilance to prevent malfunctions that could endanger maritime traffic. The introduction of electric lights in the late 19th century and later automated systems in the 1940s and 1950s began to reduce the need for permanent human oversight. By the 1980s, many lighthouses had been converted to fully automated operations, with remote monitoring and self-sustaining technologies replacing the once daily routines of keepers. This shift not only transformed the role of lighthouse keepers, but also redefined the purpose of these structures, shifting them from manned outposts to symbols of maritime heritage. Today, while some lighthouses remain active as navigational aids, many have been decommissioned or repurposed, their histories preserved in archives like the U.S. Lighthouse Society's digital catalog. These records, containing data on lighthouses, keepers, and historical equipment, ensure that the legacy of those who once tended the light endures. The Lighthouse Research Catalog serves as a dynamic resource that complements physical archives by digitizing and organizing vast amounts of data, making it accessible to researchers worldwide. Its structure allows users to explore lighthouses through multiple lenses, such as historical records, personnel details, and structural blueprints, while cross-referencing information from diverse sources like the National Archives, the National Park Service, and private collections. The catalog's emphasis on transparency is evident in its source field, which clarifies the origin of data entries, often linking to light lists or other official documents. This ensures users can trace the accuracy of historical details, such as changes in lighthouse construction or staffing over time. Additionally, the catalog's integration of photographs, drawings, and textual records provides a multi-dimensional view of each site, with users able to toggle between primary sources and contextual information. For those seeking deeper engagement, the catalog's ongoing expansion and refinement reflect a commitment to preserving and enhancing the legacy of U.S. lighthouse history. The catalog structure allows users to trace the evolution of individual lighthouses by cross-referencing their entries with associated personnel, vessels, and historical documents. For example, a researcher studying a specific keeper's career can link their name to the lighthouses they managed, the periods of their service, and even personal records like salary logs or correspondence. This interconnectedness is vital for understanding the human and technical history of lighthouses, from the early 19th century wooden towers to the modern preservation efforts. The project's collaborative nature, supported by historians, volunteers, and institutions, ensures its data remains dynamic, with ongoing updates reflecting new discoveries and digitized materials. As a result, the catalog stands as both a repository and a living resource, bridging the gap between physical archives and digital accessibility for scholars and enthusiasts alike. Lighthouse keepers were government employees tasked with maintaining and operating lighthouses to guide maritime vessels safely. Their duties included lighting and maintaining beacons, cleaning lenses, refueling lamps, and operating fog signals, all while recording weather and maritime conditions. Many lived in isolated coastal or river locations, often with limited contact with the outside world. These roles were critical to maritime safety before modern navigation systems, as lighthouses helped prevent shipwrecks and guided ships to port. Records of lighthouse keepers appear in federal appointment documents, census listings, station logs, and government publications. The U.S. Lighthouse Service, managed federally, documented these roles through detailed records, including personnel files and operational reports. Researchers can access these materials via the J. Candace Clifford Lighthouse Research Catalog, an online database containing over 3 terabytes of data on lighthouses, keepers, and related objects. This catalog, supported by donations and volunteer efforts, organizes information into categories like places, people, objects, and vessels, with data sourced from historical documents such as light lists. The catalog's source field indicates the origin of data, often referencing specific light list years, which helps contextualize the information. For example, a lighthouse's description might reflect its state in a particular year, with additional photographs or documents available for older configurations. This resource is invaluable for tracing family histories, as lighthouse keepers were often tied to specific locations, making their records easier to locate in federal or local archives. Technological advancements, such as automation, eventually reduced the need for full-time keepers, but their legacy remains in the extensive documentation of their service. Understanding their role helps genealogists interpret records related to federal employment, geographic isolation, and family life in remote maritime settings. The Lighthouse Research Catalog's structure allows users to trace the evolution of individual lighthouses through historical records, including construction phases, technological upgrades, and personnel changes. For genealogists, this means identifying a keeper's name alongside specific lighthouse details can pinpoint their exact station, tenure, and even family connections, especially when combined with census data or local histories. The catalog's integration of donor collections, such as National Archives files or private researcher contributions, ensures a layered perspective on lighthouse operations, revealing how roles adapted with maritime advancements. For instance, the transition from oil lamps to electric systems, or the introduction of automated systems in the mid-20th century, is documented through equipment records and service reports, offering context for understanding shifts in daily responsibilities. Researchers can also explore the human side of lighthouse life through personal accounts, such as letters or obituaries, which often highlight the solitude and resilience required of keepers. These resources collectively bridge the gap between bureaucratic records and the lived experiences of those who safeguarded maritime routes, making them indispensable for piecing together the stories of lighthouse families. The U.S. Lighthouse Society's archive, now known as the J. Candace Clifford Lighthouse Research Catalog, began as a physical collection but evolved into an online database in 2016. This project, led by historians and volunteers, now houses over 3 terabytes of data, including photos, documents, and records from sources like the National Park Service and the National Archives. The catalog organizes information into 4 categories: places, people, objects, and vessels, with details spanning lighthouses, keepers, and maritime equipment. It remains a vital resource for researchers, offering free access to historical data, though its development is an ongoing effort to refine and expand the collection. Logbooks from U.S. lighthouses, dating back to 1872, provide another layer of insight. These records, held at the National Archives, document daily operations, weather conditions, repairs, and even rescues. The transition of lighthouse management to the Coast Guard in 1939 is reflected in these logs, which now form part of Record Group 26. Some World War I-era entries may also appear in Navy logbooks, highlighting the interconnectedness of maritime records. Researchers can access these materials by contacting the National Archives, though the depth of information varies over time. The Association of Lighthouse Keepers archives, meanwhile, focus on the human side of lighthouse history. Spanning the globe but emphasizing the British Isles, the collection includes station journals, photographs, and personal accounts from keepers, particularly those from the automation era. Over 15,000 items, such as 2,000-plus station journals and 700-plus artifacts, offer a social history of lighthouse life. Digitization efforts have preserved many of these materials, ensuring their availability for future study. The U.S. Lighthouse Society's physical archives, once housed at its headquarters, have been relocated to the Mariners Museum in Virginia. While books are not loaned out, the Society connects researchers with historians at the Point-No-Point Lighthouse or provides digital access for special requests. This shift underscores the importance of digital preservation, as seen in the Lighthouse Research Catalog, which now hosts a significant portion of the Society's holdings. Together, these archives form a comprehensive record of lighthouse history, blending technical data with personal narratives. They reflect the evolution of maritime safety and the dedication of those who maintain these structures. While challenges remain in preserving and accessing these records, the collaborative efforts of institutions and volunteers ensure that lighthouse history remains accessible for generations. The history of lighthouse keepers in the United States includes instances of African American participation, reflecting broader societal changes. In the mid to late 19th century, as enslaved individuals gained freedom, some were employed at southern lighthouses and life-saving stations. By the late 1870s, African Americans began overseeing stations, with the Pea Island Life-Saving Station in North Carolina becoming the first in the nation to have an all-African American crew, led by Richard Etheridge in 1880. These roles were significant, marking a step toward inclusion in maritime safety efforts. However, the traditional role of lighthouse keepers began to decline with automation, which rendered human oversight unnecessary. Lighthouses are automated, except the Boston Light, which remains manned due to a 1989 law. Meanwhile, in Canada, the need for lighthouse keepers persists, albeit in a different context. The Canadian Coast Guard seeks assistance to staff 51 lighthouses along the west coast, particularly in British Columbia, where conditions are harsh and remote. Keepers work year-round, managing lamps and lenses, often in isolation. The job demands resilience, as keepers may face extended periods of solitude, unpredictable weather, and limited access to supplies. For instance, some stations require helicopter support for resupply, and keepers might spend months without leave due to hazardous conditions. The role also involves constant vigilance, with keepers monitoring weather reports and alerting mariners to changing conditions. Despite the challenges, the position offers unique rewards. The contrast between historical and modern keepers highlights evolving societal roles. From the early days of African American laborers to today's remote, automated stations, the profession has adapted to technological and cultural changes. Yet, the core mission guiding ships safely remains unchanged. For those drawn to the challenge, the role offers a blend of solitude, responsibility, and a chance to preserve a vital part of maritime history. Lighthouses were more than navigational aids. They were economic engines that underpinned the growth of maritime trade and coastal communities. By ensuring safe passage for vessels, they minimized the risk of shipwrecks, which could devastate cargo, crew, and local economies. The U.S. Lighthouse Service's annual reports from the 19th century document the critical role of lighthouses in preventing maritime disasters. For example, the 1852 report noted that the Great Lakes' lighthouses alone averted over 100 shipwrecks between 1840 and 1850, saving countless lives and preserving millions in cargo value. This reliability fostered confidence in maritime commerce, enabling the expansion of trade routes and the rise of port cities. Lighthouses also supported tourism, as their dramatic structures and coastal locations became landmarks. By the late 19th century, sites like the Boston Light and Cape Hatteras Lighthouse drew visitors, boosting local economies through lodging, dining, and souvenir sales. The financial sustainability of lighthouses relied on a blend of public funding, and operational efficiency. Initially, lighthouses were funded through tariffs on imported goods, as stipulated by the 1789 Lighthouse Act. This system ensured that those benefiting from maritime trade contributed to its safety. However, as trade expanded, the cost of maintaining lighthouses grew. Manual operations required keepers to live in remote locations, often with limited amenities, but their presence was vital. Salary records from the 19th century, such as those in the registers of lighthouse keepers, reveal that keepers earned between $150 and $300 annually, a modest sum that reflected the era's economic conditions. These wages, combined with government subsidies, allowed lighthouses to operate without direct taxation. Automation in the 20th century transformed financial sustainability. By the 1980s, advancements in technology enabled lighthouses to operate without human keepers, drastically reducing labor costs. For instance, the 1989 Boston Light Act mandated continued manned operation for the Boston Light, highlighting its unique cultural and historical value. Most other lighthouses, however, embraced automation, which lowered maintenance expenses and freed resources for other infrastructure projects. Today, automated lighthouses rely on government grants and private partnerships, ensuring their continued relevance in an era of declining maritime traffic. This shift underscores how lighthouses adapted to economic realities while maintaining their role as guardians of commerce and coastal communities. The shift to automation also spurred innovation in funding models. Automated lighthouses now rely on a mix of federal grants, private partnerships, and maritime insurance premiums, reflecting evolving economic priorities. Meanwhile, the Boston Light's continued manned operation underscores the tension between fiscal efficiency and preserving historical landmarks, a balance shaping lighthouse policy into the 21st century. The role of a lighthouse keeper was far more intricate than the solitary figure often depicted in popular imagination. Their primary duty was to ensure the light operated according to a schedule tailored to each station's location, weather, and other factors. During storms, this duty expanded to 24-hour operation until conditions stabilized. Beyond technical responsibilities, keepers managed daily life at remote stations, often with families. Quarters attached to lighthouses or nearby homes allowed spouses and children to reside there, with family members frequently assisting in tasks like maintenance or navigation. Women, in particular, played active roles, sometimes inheriting the position upon a husband's death or incapacitation and serving for decades. The workforce also reflected broader societal changes. By the mid-19th century, African Americans were integral to lighthouse operations, working as paid servants or enslaved individuals. As emancipation progressed, newly freed people were hired, and by the late 1870s, some lighthouses were staffed entirely by African Americans. Richard Etheridge, for instance, became the first African American keeper of the Pea Island life-saving station in 1880, leading an all-African American crew. These shifts underscored the evolving role of lighthouses as sites of both maritime safety and social transformation. Automation gradually rendered human keepers obsolete, leaving only the Boston Light, mandated to remain manned by law in 1989. Historical records, such as the National Archives Lighthouse logbooks from 1872-1940, offer insight into this transition, documenting weather, repairs, rescues, and daily routines. Digital archives like the U.S. Lighthouse Society's research catalog further preserve details about keepers, structures, and vessels, revealing a rich tapestry of human and technical history. These sources remind us that lighthouses were not just beacons for ships, but also microcosms of the communities and eras they served. The transition to automation in the mid-20th century marked a significant shift in lighthouse operations, though it did not erase the cultural and historical significance of the keepers' roles. As electric lights replaced oil lamps and automated systems took over maintenance tasks, many former keepers found themselves displaced, yet their contributions remained embedded in the records preserved in logbooks and archives. These documents, now digitized and accessible through resources like the J. Candace Clifford Lighthouse Research Catalog, offer a window into the daily lives of keepers, their interactions with maritime communities, and the challenges of maintaining coastal safety in an era of technological change. For instance, entries from the 1920s and 1930s often note the increasing reliance on mechanical systems, such as rotating lenses and remote monitoring, while still requiring human oversight for critical decisions during emergencies. The catalog's detailed categorization of lighthouses, personnel, and equipment also highlights the diversity of structures and practices across regions, from the wooden towers of the 19th century to the reinforced concrete designs of later decades. This wealth of data not only preserves the technical history of lighthouses, but also underscores the human stories behind their construction and operation, ensuring that the legacy of keepers, both white and black, male and female, remains visible in the broader narrative of American maritime history. The role of a lighthouse keeper was demanding, often requiring early mornings and late nights. Their primary responsibility was ensuring the light operated according to schedules, which varied by location and weather. During storms, the light had to stay on 24/7 until conditions improved. Keepers also handled repairs and emergencies, including responding to shipwrecks. While the image of a solitary, weathered keeper persists, the reality was more complex. Many keepers lived with families, who often assisted in daily tasks. Women frequently contributed to duties, and some inherited the role after a spouse or father's death. By the mid-19th century, African Americans played significant roles, both as paid servants and enslaved individuals. As societal changes unfolded, lighthouse staffing evolved. By the late 1870s, some lighthouses were overseen by African American keepers, and by 1880, the Pea Island Life-Saving Station in North Carolina became the first all-African American life-saving station, led by Richard Etheridge. Automation gradually replaced the need for human keepers. Today, all U.S. lighthouses are automated, except the Boston Light, which remains manned due to a 1989 law. This exception highlights the historical and cultural significance of certain sites. The transition to automation reflects broader technological shifts, but it also underscores the enduring legacy of lighthouse keepers. For those studying this history, two key resources exist. The U.S. Lighthouse Society's archive, now accessible online, contains over 3 terabytes of data. It includes photos, documents, and records organized by categories like places, people, objects, and vessels. This collection, built through collaboration and donations, offers insights into lighthouses, their keepers, and related infrastructure. Additionally, the National Archives houses logbooks from 1872 to 1940, detailing weather, repairs, personnel change. These records, part of Record Group 26, provide a detailed look at daily life and challenges faced by keepers. Both resources emphasize the complexity of lighthouse history. While the role of keepers has diminished, their contributions remain vital to understanding maritime safety and coastal communities. The archives and logbooks serve as bridges to the past, preserving stories of resilience, adaptation, and the human element in technological progress. For researchers, they offer a window into a bygone era, where lighthouses were not just beacons of light, but centers of community and duty. The transition from manned to automated lighthouses marked a significant shift in maritime safety practices. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, lighthouse keepers were essential to guiding ships through treacherous waters. But technological advancements gradually reduced their necessity. Today, all U.S. lighthouses operate automatically, except for the Boston Light, which remains manned due to a 1989 law. This exception highlights the historical importance of human oversight in critical navigation systems. The Boston Light, located in Boston Harbor, serves as a living testament to the era when lighthouse keepers were indispensable. Lighthouse keepers were responsible for maintaining and operating lighthouses, ensuring their lights functioned reliably to prevent shipwrecks. Their duties included lighting and cleaning Fresnel lenses, refueling lamps, operating fog signals, and recording weather conditions. Many lived in isolation, often far from urban centers, with families enduring harsh coastal environments. The role combined technical expertise with the challenges of long-term solitude. Keepers were typically government employees, appointed through federal or maritime authorities, and their positions were often long-term, with some families serving across generations. The U.S. Lighthouse Society's digital archive, known as the J. Candace Clifford Lighthouse Research Catalog, provides a comprehensive resource for studying these roles. It houses over 3 terabytes of data, organized into categories like places, people, objects, and vessels. The archive includes historical records, photographs, and documents, offering insights into the evolution of lighthouse technology and operations. Researchers can access this information online, though the data reflects specific historical snapshots, such as light list entries from particular years. For example, a lighthouse's description might reference a 1908 light list, while photographs or additional documents may show later modifications. The automation of lighthouses in the 20th century diminished the need for full-time keepers, though some remote stations remained manned until recent decades. This shift reflects broader trends in industrialization and technological reliance. Despite their declining numbers, lighthouse keepers left a lasting legacy in maritime history. Their records, found in federal appointment logs, census data, and local histories, provide valuable context for understanding 19th-century navigation and coastal life. The catalog and other archives ensure that these stories endure, bridging the gap between historical practice and modern research. For genealogists and historians, lighthouse keepers offer unique opportunities to trace family ties to specific locations and occupations. Their roles, shaped by isolation and responsibility, reveal the complexities of life in remote maritime settings. As automation continues to reshape industries, the study of lighthouse keepers remains a window into the past, preserving the human element behind critical infrastructure. The records are arranged alphabetically by name of light vessel. Their primary duty was ensuring the light operated according to schedule, which varied by location and weather. During storms, the light had to stay on 24/7 until conditions improved. Keepers also handled repairs, maintenance, and emergency responses, including rescuing shipwreck survivors. While the image of a solitary, weathered keeper persists, the reality was more varied. Many keepers lived with families, who often assisted with tasks. Women frequently took on roles alongside or in place of their husbands. And by the mid-19th century, African Americans worked as paid staff or enslaved individuals at lighthouses. As societal changes unfolded, African American keepers gained prominence, with some overseeing stations by the late 1800s. The Pea Island Life-Saving Station in North Carolina, for example, became the first all-African American life-saving station in 1880, led by Richard Etheridge. Automation gradually replaced the need for human keepers, making lighthouses largely self-sufficient. Today, all U.S. lighthouses are automated except the Boston Light, which remains manned due to a 1989 law. This exception highlights the enduring significance of certain sites. For those studying lighthouses, resources like the Lighthouse Research Catalog offer extensive data. This digital archive, developed by the U.S. Lighthouse Society, includes photos, documents, and records organized by categories such as places, people, objects, and vessels. It draws from collections like the National Park Service and National Archives, providing free access to over 3 terabytes of information. Similarly, the National Archives houses logbooks from 1872 to 1940, detailing weather, repairs, and incidents. These records, part of Record Group 26, offer insight into the daily lives and challenges of keepers. The transition from manual to automated systems reflects broader technological shifts, yet the human element remains in places like Boston. These archives and logbooks preserve the history of lighthouses, capturing both the practical and personal aspects of the keepers' lives. They serve as vital tools for researchers, ensuring that the legacy of these structures and the people who safeguarded them is not forgotten. The life of a lighthouse keeper was defined by isolation, a reality shaped by the remote locations where these structures stood. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, lighthouses were important for maritime navigation, warning vessels of dangerous shoals, reefs, and coastlines. This solitude was both a necessity and a challenge, as the role demanded constant vigilance to ensure the beacon remained operational, guiding ships through treacherous waters. Daily routines were structured yet monotonous, centered on maintaining the light and its associated systems. Keepers cleaned Fresnel lenses, refueled lamps, operated fog signals, and recorded weather conditions, tasks requiring precision and patience. The repetition of these duties, combined with the vast, unchanging landscapes surrounding them, fostered a sense of timelessness. While some keepers found solace in the quiet of their posts, others struggled with the psychological toll of prolonged separation from society. The isolation was compounded by the physical demands of the job, maintaining equipment at heights, navigating harsh weather, and managing limited supplies tested both body and mind. Families who accompanied keepers faced their own challenges, balancing domestic life with the demands of a remote existence. Yet, for many, the role was a source of pride, a duty tied to the safety of maritime travel. Over time, technological advancements began to reshape the occupation, reducing the need for full-time keepers. But for those who served, the psychological impact of their isolation remained a defining aspect of their work, shaping their experiences in ways both profound and enduring. Understanding lighthouse keepers' roles and the records tied to them can illuminate family histories, especially for those whose ancestors lived in coastal or riverine regions. Census records, for instance, often list lighthouse keepers by occupation and residence, providing geographic anchors for further research. Station logs and reports may include detailed accounts of daily operations, weather events, or incidents involving vessels, offering contextual clues about a keeper's life and responsibility. For families with multiple generations of keepers, these documents can trace lineage, highlight long-term service, or reveal shifts in employment practices over time. Additionally, local histories and maritime archives sometimes preserve oral traditions or community accounts that complement official records, enriching the narrative of lighthouse life. Researchers should also consider the interplay between federal oversight and local conditions, as variations in management or technology could influence the types of records preserved. By cross-referencing these sources, genealogists can piece together a more nuanced picture of lighthouse keepers' contributions and the challenges they faced in their isolated, vital roles. The role of lighthouse keepers evolved significantly over time, shaped by technological advancements and shifting maritime needs. The care of the nation's lighthouses was transferred between agencies until 1910, when Congress established the Bureau of Lighthouses. Their work often required isolation, as many lighthouses were located in remote areas, and families sometimes lived on-site. A keeper's job was typically more than a 24-hour shift, though it could vary. However, the advent of automation gradually reduced the need for human keepers, leading to the eventual closure of most lighthouses. Today, only the Boston Light remains manned, a decision rooted in a 1989 law that preserved its historical significance. The U.S. Lighthouse Society's digital archive, known as the J. Candace Clifford Lighthouse Research Catalog, plays a crucial role in documenting this history. Created through collaborative efforts, the catalog houses over 3 terabytes of data, offering researchers access to a wealth of information about lighthouses, their keepers, and related equipment. The archive's structure is organized into 4 categories: places, people, objects, and vessels. Each entry includes detailed records, often sourced from historical documents like light lists, which provide specific details about a lighthouse's configuration at a given time. For example, a lighthouse might have undergone multiple construction phases, such as wooden towers replaced by brick structures, and the catalog reflects these changes through photographs and source citations. The catalog's development addressed the challenge of making historical data accessible. Initially, the archive required physical visits to the Society's headquarters, but advancements in digital technology enabled online access. This shift democratized research, allowing genealogists and historians to explore records about keepers, their families, and the operational details of lighthouses. The data includes federal appointment records, station logs, and census entries, offering insights into the lives of those who served in these roles. For instance, keepers might appear in government documents as lighthouse keeper or assistant keeper, with some records noting their family's involvement in the work. The catalog also highlights the transition from manual to automated systems. While most lighthouses were mechanized by the mid-20th century, the Boston Light's continued manned operation underscores the cultural and historical value of these structures. The archive preserves not only technical details, but also the human stories behind them, such as the challenges of isolation and the risks of coastal life. Researchers can explore how keepers navigated severe weather, maintained equipment, and documented maritime conditions. By compiling data from diverse sources, including the National Park Service, the USCG Historian's Office, and individual collections, the catalog serves as a comprehensive resource for understanding lighthouse history. Its ongoing expansion ensures that future generations can access this information, bridging the gap between past and present. For those studying maritime history or genealogy, the archive offers a unique window into the lives of those who safeguarded navigation through centuries of change. The National Archives holds extensive records related to U.S. The Society maintains files on every lighthouse in the United States and notable lighthouses globally. Series within record. Group 26, such as NC31, Series 82 and 87, document nominations, transfers, and salaries, while logbooks from 1872 to 1940 provide operational details. These records are often available on microfilm, though some series, like the 1832 to 1860 keeper appointments, require searching by date. The U.S. Lighthouse Society maintains a global archive with over 2,000 books, digital files, and station journals. Though physical access is limited to research, the Association of Lighthouse Keepers archives focused on the British Isles include station journals and digitized materials from the 17th century to the 20th century. For specific records, contacting the National Archives Reference Section or the Society's staff is recommended, as some publications are out of print or require special requests. For researchers seeking detailed operational records, the Lighthouse Research Catalog serves as a centralized index linking historical data from multiple repositories, including the Mariners Museum and the U.S. Lighthouse Society's holdings. This catalog, maintained by the Lighthouse History Project, organizes information by light station, equipment, and historical events, offering a navigable resource for those unable to access physical archives. Additionally, The Association of Lighthouse Keepers collection includes unique materials, such as station journals from the automation era, which provide first-hand accounts of technological transitions and daily life in lighthouse operations. These journals, often accompanied by engineers' drawings and sea charts, offer insights into the shift from manual to automated systems. For those interested in maritime safety, some lighthouse records intersect with naval archives, particularly during World War I, where lighthouse logs and naval logbooks may overlap in documenting coastal defense activities. Access to such interdisciplinary materials typically requires collaboration between archival institutions and specialized historical societies. For researchers seeking additional resources, the Lighthouse Research Catalog serves as a centralized database compiling information from multiple archives, including the U.S. Lighthouse Society, the National Archives, and the Association of Lighthouse Keepers. This tool allows users to search for specific lighthouses, historical events, or personnel records across disparate collections. However, access to original documents often requires navigating institutional protocols, as many archives restrict physical access to preserve fragile materials or due to copyright considerations. Digital surrogates, such as scanned logbooks or indexed personnel files, are increasingly available through partnerships between historical societies and academic institutions, though these are frequently limited to subscription-based platforms or specialized repositories. Private collectors and family estates also hold niche records, such as personal journals or photographs, which may be accessible through genealogical services or local historical societies. As with any archival pursuit, the process demands patience, as gaps in documentation, whether from lost records, incomplete filings, or the passage of time, remain a persistent challenge. The records of U.S. lighthouse keepers are preserved in the National Archives, with key documents including appointment letters, logbooks, and administrative files. Appointment records, such as those in Record Group 26, detail the date of appointment, salary, and other remarks the keepers, organized chronologically or alphabetically by station. These volumes also include letters of promotion, declination, and nominations, offering insight into the hiring process. Logbooks, spanning 1872 to 1940, provide daily accounts of lighthouse operations, weather conditions, repairs, and emergencies. Early logs were brief, while later entries included more detailed observations. These records are crucial for understanding the daily life and responsibilities of keepers, who maintained lights, managed stations, and responded to maritime crises. The U.S. Coast Guard took over lighthouse management in 1939, and subsequent records reflect this transition. Lighthouse keepers were federal employees from 1896, following the establishment of the Bureau of Lighthouses in 1910. Their duties extended beyond operating lights, encompassing maintenance, inspections, and rescue efforts. Keepers often lived alone or with families, with some stations housing entire households. Women occasionally assisted or inherited keeper roles, and African Americans played significant roles, particularly in southern stations, though their contributions were often overlooked. The profession evolved with automation, which rendered human keepers obsolete by the late 20th century. Today, only the Boston Light remains manned, a decision made in 1989 to preserve its historical significance. Additional resources, such as the Association of Lighthouse Keepers archives, highlight the social and cultural aspects of the profession. These collections include station journals, photographs, and artifacts, documenting the transition from manual to automated systems. While the National Archives holds extensive records, the Association's archives offer a more personal perspective, capturing the lived experiences of keepers. Together, these sources paint a comprehensive picture of lighthouse history, from the 18th century to modern automation. Researchers seeking details on specific keepers, stations, or events should consult these records, which remain vital for understanding the role of lighthouses in maritime safety and national infrastructure. The interplay between administrative documentation and personal accounts ensures a nuanced understanding of this unique chapter in American history. The U.S. Lighthouse Society's archive, now digitized into the J. Candace Clifford Lighthouse Research Catalog, stands as a monumental resource for lighthouse history. Spanning over 3 terabytes of data, it categorizes information into places, people, objects, and vessels, drawing from diverse sources like the National Park Service and the National Archives. This freely accessible online collection, made possible by donations and member support, allows researchers to explore lighthouses, their keepers, and related artifacts without physical travel. The data's source field often references light lists such as LL19U8, noting that entries reflect specific historical periods, with additional details available through photographs or documents. Meanwhile, the National Archives houses physical logbooks from 1872 to 1940, detailing lighthouse operations, weather, repairs, and rescues. These records, part of Record Group 26, include entries from the U.S. Coast Guard and Navy, offering a window into lighthouse management during pivotal eras. Researchers seeking these materials can contact the National Archives directly for access. The Association of Lighthouse Keepers archives, spanning global lighthouses with a focus on the British Isles, preserve over 15,000 items, including station journals, photographs, and digitized materials. Their collection highlights both the technical and social history of lighthouse keeping, with contributions from keepers and engineers. The U.S. Lighthouse Society's own archives, though relocated to the Mariners Museum and integrated into the Lighthouse Research Catalog, remain a cornerstone of research. While physical access to books is restricted, the Society connects researchers to historians at their headquarters or provides digital materials upon request. Together, these archives form a rich tapestry of lighthouse history, accessible to all who seek to explore its depths. The archives of the Association of Lighthouse Keepers offer a unique lens into the personal and professional lives of those who maintain these structures, with station journals and memoirs providing first-hand accounts of daily routines, challenges, and the evolving role of lighthouses in maritime safety. These materials, spanning from the 17th century to the automation era, complement institutional records by capturing the human element of lighthouse operations. Meanwhile, the U.S. Lighthouse Society's digital resources, including microfilmed documents and scanned photographs, serve as a bridge between historical preservation and modern accessibility, allowing researchers to explore lighthouse architecture, technological advancements, and the transition from manual to automated systems. For those seeking specialized access, institutions like the National Archives and the Mariners Museum house physical collections that require direct inquiry, ensuring that the legacy of lighthouses remains both preserved and discoverable through collaborative efforts across global repositories. Lighthouse keepers played a vital role in maritime safety for centuries, serving as guardians of the seas. The U.S. Lighthouse Service, established in 1789, took over lighthouses from state control, marking the beginning of a federal system. Initially, keepers reported to local customs officials, but by the late 19th century the role became more professionalized. Civil service status was granted in 1896, and the Bureau of Lighthouses was formed in 1910, later absorbed by the Coast Guard in 1939. These keepers were responsible for maintaining lights, ensuring they operated according to schedules, and responding to emergencies like storms or shipwrecks. Their duties extended beyond lighting, repairing equipment, cleaning lenses, refueling lamps, and operating fog signals. Daily routines often began before dawn and ended after dusk, with some stations requiring 24-hour vigilance during severe weather. Life as a keeper was demanding, marked by isolation and responsibility. Women often contributed to the role, either as assistants, taking over after a husband's death, or inheriting the position. African American keepers also played a significant role, particularly in the South, with some stations staffed entirely by black workers by the late 1800s. The Pea Island Life-Saving Station in North Carolina, for example, was the first to have an all-black crew led by Richard Etheridge in 1880. The job required both technical skill and resilience. Keepers faced harsh weather, limited supplies, and long periods of solitude. They maintained detailed records of weather and maritime conditions, which became valuable historical documents. Over time, technological advancements like automation reduced the need for full-time keepers. By the late 20th century, nearly all U.S. lighthouses were automated, except the Boston Light, which remains manned due to a 1989 law. For genealogists, lighthouse keepers offer unique insights. Their roles were tied to specific locations, making them easier to trace in records like census data, appointment logs, and station reports. Family life in these remote settings often left lasting impacts on local histories. While the profession declined with automation, its legacy endures in preserved lighthouses and the stories of those who kept the lights burning. Understanding this role helps connect past and present, revealing how these keepers shaped maritime safety and community history. The U.S. Lighthouse Society has long maintained a comprehensive archive of lighthouse data, including photos, documents, and other materials. Initially, access was limited to physical visits to the Society's headquarters, but in 2016, efforts began to digitize this collection. Candace Clifford, the Society's historian, and Thomas Tagg, a technical advisor, spearheaded the creation of a searchable online database called the J. Candace Clifford. Over Clifford, who passed away in 2018, organized into 4 categories. Data sources include contributions from the National Park Service, the U.S. Coast Guard, and individual researchers. The catalog is freely accessible online, supported by donations and member contributions, and continues to expand as more data is added. For physical records, the National Archives in Washington, D.C. holds lighthouse logbooks dating from 1872 to 1940. These logs, part of Record Group 26, document weather conditions, repairs, personnel changes, and rescue operations. The U.S. Lighthouse Service became part of the Coast Guard in 1939, and its records are now part of the Coast Guard's holdings. Some World War I-era logs may also be found in Navy records. Researchers can contact the National Archives for access details. The U.S. Lighthouse Society's archives, while partially relocated to the Mariners Museum in Virginia, remain a critical resource. The Society maintains detailed files on U.S. and global lighthouses, along with thousands of photos, drawings, and microfilms. However, physical access to books is restricted, though members can request digital information or connect with researchers at the Society's headquarters. The Association of Lighthouse Keepers Archives focus on the social history of lighthouse operations, with a global emphasis on the British Isles. Their collection includes over 15,000 items, such as station journals, photographs, and digitized materials, spanning from the 17th century to the automation era. These archives provide insight into the daily lives of keepers and the evolution of lighthouse technology. Each of these resources offers unique perspectives on lighthouse history, from operational records to personal accounts. While some data is digitized for broader access, others remain in physical repositories, highlighting the importance of both digital and archival preservation. Researchers are encouraged to consult multiple sources to gain a comprehensive understanding of this maritime heritage. The U.S. Lighthouse Society maintains a vast archive of lighthouse data, including photos, documents, and historical records. Initially, access was limited to physical visits to their headquarters, but in 2016, they launched an online catalog called the J. Candace Clifford Lighthouse Research Catalog. This digital repository now holds over 3 terabytes of information, organized into categories like lighthouses, keepers, objects, and vessels. Data is sourced from various institutions, including the National Park Service and the National Archives, and is freely accessible online. The catalog allows users to explore lighthouse details, with specific sources noted for each entry, often referencing light lists from particular years. While the main images show lighthouses as they appear today, additional photos of historical structures can be found through the Document feature. Lighthouse logbooks, spanning from 1872 to 1940, are preserved at the National Archives. These records, initially simple weather notes, evolved to include detailed accounts of repairs, personnel changes, and rescue operations. The U.S. Lighthouse Service became part of the Coast Guard in 1939, and its records are now part of Record Group 26. Some World War I-era logs may also be found in Navy records. Researchers can contact the National Archives for access to these materials. The Association of Lighthouse Keepers Archives focus on the social history of lighthouse work, with a global scope, but a strong emphasis on the British Isles. The collection includes over 15,000 items, such as station journals, photographs, and digitized materials, with the most detailed records from the automation era. The U.S. Lighthouse Society also houses extensive archives, though many books have been relocated to the Mariners Museum. Their digital files include over 100,000 items, such as photos and microfilms, and members can request access to resources at their headquarters. While physical loans are not available, the Society connects researchers with historians and provides digital information for special requests. These archives collectively offer a comprehensive view of lighthouse history, from operational records to personal accounts, ensuring that the legacy of these structures and their keepers remains accessible for future study. The history of the United States Lighthouse Service begins in 1789 with the first Public Works Act, which transferred lighthouses from state to federal control. Initially, keepers operated under local collectors of customs, but by 1896, their roles became civil service positions. The Bureau of Lighthouses was established in 1910, and the Coast Guard assumed responsibility in 1939. Lighthouse keepers lived a demanding life, working dawn to dusk and responding to emergencies like shipwrecks. Their primary duty was ensuring the light operated according to schedules, often extending to 24-hour operation during storms. The 1927 instructions to employees outlined routines, conduct standards, and uniform requirements, reflecting the professionalization of the role. While the image of a solitary keeper persists, the reality was more varied. Families often accompanied keepers, with women contributing to duties or inheriting positions. By the mid-19th century, African Americans worked as paid servants or enslaved individuals at lighthouses. But by the late 1870s, some stations were overseen by African American keepers. The Pea Island Life Saving Station in North Carolina, commanded by Richard Etheridge in 1880, became the first all-African American life-saving station. Automation gradually replaced human keepers, leaving only the Boston Light manned since 1989, as mandated by law. Logbooks from 1872–1940 housed at the National Archives, and archives from the U.S. Lighthouse Society and the Association of Lighthouse Keepers preserve detailed records of these transitions, including weather logs, repairs, and social histories. These sources reveal the evolving roles of keepers, from isolated figures to diverse family-oriented positions, and the gradual shift toward mechanization. The transition to automation in the late 20th century marked a pivotal shift in lighthouse operations, rendering many roles obsolete. However, the legacy of lighthouse keepers endures through meticulously preserved records and archives. For instance, The National Archives houses logbooks spanning 1872 to 1940, offering unparalleled insight into the daily lives of keepers. These documents detail not only weather patterns and maintenance tasks, but also critical events like rescues and personnel changes, providing a vivid tapestry of the era's challenges. Meanwhile, the U.S. Lighthouse Society's archives, now partially relocated to the Mariners Museum, serve as a treasure trove for researchers, containing over 2,000 books, thousands of photographs, and digitized materials that trace the evolution of lighthouse technology and culture. The Association of Lighthouse Keepers archives further enrich this narrative, with their collection of station journals, personal memoirs, and artifacts shedding light on the human side of the profession, particularly during the automation period. These resources collectively ensure that the stories of those who once stood vigil over the seas remain accessible, bridging the past and present for future generations. The legacy of lighthouse keepers endures not only in the physical structures they maintained, but in the meticulous records that preserve their stories. The data became a primary source of lighthouse information for members and researchers. Lighthouse Society's collection, now digitized in the J. Candace Clifford Lighthouse Research Catalog, offer a window into their world. These repositories, spanning photographs, documents, and oral histories, capture the daily rituals of keepers who navigated both the tides and the demands of their profession. From the National Archives Lighthouse site files to the U.S. Coast Guard's historical records, these materials reveal a profession shaped by both necessity and human resilience. The keeper's routines, from tending to the light's operation to repairing its mechanisms, were as much about precision as they were about vigilance. Yet their work extended beyond the technical. They were first responders to shipwrecks, custodians of isolated outposts, and often the sole human presence in vast, untamed landscapes. The evolution of the lighthouse service itself reflects the broader societal shifts that shaped these roles. Established in 1789, the service initially relied on local collectors of customs to oversee lighthouses, but by the 19th century, it had become a professionalized entity. The 1896 civil service reforms formalized the keeper's status, while the 1927 instructions to employees outlined not just operational standards, but also expectations for conduct, uniformity, and emergency protocols. These guidelines underscored the dual nature of the keeper's duty, a blend of technical expertise and personal responsibility. Families often accompanied keepers to remote stations, with spouses and children contributing to the work. Women, in particular, played vital roles, sometimes inheriting the position upon a husband's death or taking over during crises. The presence of African American keepers, such as Richard Etheridge at Pea Island Life Saving Station, highlights the diversity of the workforce, even as systemic inequalities persisted. Automation, beginning in the mid-20th century, gradually rendered the traditional keeper obsolete. By the 1980s, nearly all U.S. lighthouses were unmanned, save for the Boston Light, which remains manned by law. This exception underscores the enduring cultural and historical value of the keeper's role. Today, the legacy lives on through preserved archives, museum exhibits, and the continued stewardship of sites like the Boston Light. The keeper's stories, once confined to the margins of maritime history, now form a vital part of the narrative of American innovation and resilience. Their contributions, both practical and symbolic, remind us that the light they tended was not just a beacon for ships, but a testament to human perseverance in the face of the unknown. The history of lighthouse keepers in the United States reflects broader societal shifts, particularly in the mid to late 19th century. As African Americans gained freedom following the Civil War, they began to fill roles in lighthouse and life-saving stations, especially in the South. By the late 1870s, some lighthouses were managed by African American keepers, And by 1880, the Pea Island Life-Saving Station in North Carolina became the first in the nation to have an all-African-American crew, led by Richard Etheridge. These roles were part of a gradual transition from enslaved labor to paid employment, though the work remained demanding and isolated. Today, most U.S. lighthouses are automated, with the exception of the Boston Light, which remains manned due to a 1989 law requiring human oversight. In contrast, lighthouse keepers in Canada continue to play a vital role, though their work is increasingly rare. The Canadian Coast Guard currently seeks assistant keepers for 51 staffed lighthouses along the west coast, particularly in British Columbia. These positions require applicants to live and work in remote locations for extended periods, often up to a year, with only limited leave. The job involves maintaining lamps, lenses, and other equipment, while also monitoring weather conditions and alerting mariners to potential dangers. Keepers must adapt to isolation, as they are often stationed on islands or coastal outposts with minimal human contact. The role demands resilience and adaptability. Keepers like Barry Porter, a retired lighthouse keeper from Newfoundland, describe the work as both rewarding and challenging. Porter, who spent over 2 decades managing lighthouses, emphasized the physical and emotional toll of living in remote areas, where harsh weather and limited access to supplies can disrupt routines. Similarly, Caroline Woodward, another retired keeper, highlighted the psychological impact of solitude, though she found solace in the natural beauty of the Pacific Northwest. Both noted the necessity of working 7 days a week, often with shifts starting at dawn or in the dead of night, and the need to monitor weather patterns to ensure safety. Despite the hardships, some keepers view the job as fulfilling. Woodward, who worked at multiple lighthouses across British Columbia, described the work as a wonderful chapter of her life, citing the opportunity to connect with nature and provide critical support to maritime travelers. However, the role is not without its difficulties. Keepers often face logistical challenges, such as relying on helicopters to transport supplies or evacuate in emergencies. Food delivery is infrequent, with provisions arriving once a month via air, prompting some to take up gardening as a hobby. The profession remains niche, with applicants needing technical skills in mechanical and electrical systems, as well as basic computer literacy. While salaries have increased, the job's demands mean it appeals to those seeking a unique lifestyle. For those interested, the Canadian Coast Guard accepts applications before the year's end, offering a glimpse into a world where isolation and responsibility go hand in hand.